Any questions? We had to go through there. Any questions seeing that? You know, we've covered a lot of different things about how computers are getting more brain-like. Does that stimulate your brain in any way to ask any particular questions? What you got?
What's keeping it from thinking on its own?
We're not programmed to respond to that? Oh, that's a good question. Who do you want to ask?
Anyone who would like to.
Yeah, how come it's not thinking on its own? Is it? Do we know? Will it ever?
Well, I can answer. I think that one thing we know about the universe is that there are objects in it that think. And we know that from looking around us and looking at ourselves thinking. But going from that understanding that these things exist to actually building something with a subjective experience and something that can think is quite interesting and quite complex. We don't really understand yet how that arises from simple processes like I showed you in those movies. But once we do, there seems to be no reason why a physical system engineered and constructed out of artificial materials like you heard Steve talk about could actually do that. That's my belief. We need to get working on that in order to actually make it happen.
Questions? What else we got? Yeah.
So the question was, how long will it be before computers outsmart humans? And that's a really interesting question. I think in certain applications, we're already there. A computer can perform a task that previously only humans could do, but now a computer can do it much better. And it's kind of related to the previous question that James was answering about when can computers think. And I think it will be a long time before computers perform every computational task or cognitive task better than humans. But in the shorter term, for specific kinds of things, I think we're already there.
What other kind of questions on your mind?
So someone, Masakowitz on Twitter, asked, it said, it's scary that you only need a brain the size of a worm to play Pong. What would be needed for Madden football?
I would think smaller than a worm. No? What do you think, Steve? Steve, are you there? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I certainly think it would be smaller than a full human-sized brain to reduce tasks. But at this point, I guess we don't really know. But it's certainly a challenge we would love to go after sometime in the future.
Am I allowed to ask questions? On that same notion, do you think we're going to see a day where, with how many of you play multiplayer online games instead of studying? No, but do you think that we're going to see a day, I would predict that we would, but do you think we're going to see a day where you're playing against somebody, Ninja, Black Ninja in, Cleveland is actually a computer since somebody's messing with you? I mean, how hard would that be? Is that going to happen?
Well, so I think your question reveals that you don't actually play these games because anybody who plays COD knows that there are AIs in these games already where
No, I've seen them, but I mean, I'm thinking about, there's a test called the Turing test, which is, if you can't see who's at the other end, you can't tell it's a computer. I would know that one of those, I do play online stuff, and I would know that if they're better than me, they must be a computer, right? No, but do you think there should be a Turing test for games? Like the first-person tour, or I don't know.
But so I think that's an interesting idea. A lot of people ask whether or not Watson could pass the Turing test, and I always rephrase the question and say, well, if you redefine the Turing test to be, I can't tell the difference between a human and Watson playing Jeopardy, then perhaps Watson would have passed the Turing test. And I think you're rephrasing the Turing test a little differently. If I'm in an online multiplayer game and I can't tell the difference between a human playing and a computer AI character.
Who's doing the fragging?
Yeah.
That's interesting. What else we got? Yeah.
I know that Watson reads the text and that's how it understands the question, but how does Watson handle bad spelling and typos? Does it?
So Watson, in the Jeopardy system, because it's all professionally produced, there is actually no typo or no spelling mistakes. But as you know, in the real world, that's not true. So as we take Watson into the real world, we're starting to be able to deal with these questions. And it actually goes way beyond just spelling mistakes. But spelling mistakes, if a word is not in a dictionary, you know it's wrong and you find a way to fix it. But there are cases that we're seeing where people are asking questions that are incomplete. So we actually get questions that said the IBM computer that beat Jeopardy is called the ? That's it. So the question is not complete, it's not well formed, there are grammatical mistakes, and also whether the input medium is also important. If you have a speech recognition system, if the person is actually speaking, you will not get out of dictionary words because the speech recognition uses a dictionary. So by definition, every word you would find in a dictionary, but it may be the wrong word. So the way you need to correct them is actually different. So we're actually working on solving those problems right now.
Yeah, I'm going to add one other thing to that. We mentioned earlier that we're adapting Watson to medicine right now. And one of the examples of that is being able to look at an electronic medical record and get some insights from it. And, doctors will use abbreviations and all sorts of things that are not part of the normal language. So as part of our development in adapting to that environment, we're having to deal with that and come up with algorithms that understand those kinds of things and can make sense of them.
So I have a follow-up question. So these days with information overload, it's hard to, I have a mic, it's hard to figure out what information is reliable versus not, right? And as we develop these systems that, troll and take a whole bunch of this information, what are you building into systems like the future Watson that enables it to differentiate between information sources that are reliable and not reliable?
Yeah, that's something that we hear a lot, particularly in the medical domain. You can imagine that when we're coming up with answers, the clinicians would like to be sure that the information that we're providing is coming from sources that are reliable. So I think there's a number of different techniques that we're exploring at this point in time. We don't have all of the answers, but one of the things that we're doing with these cognitive computing systems is using the knowledge of the person that's using the system to help train Watson to learn how to do those things. So have the clinician themselves look at a piece of evidence and judge whether that evidence came from a credible source or not.
Okay,
so that's one technique.
Okay, dynamically.
We're still good at
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we had some questions over here.
I have a question. Since Watson is going to be learning about health, I saw something on YouTube about Verizon doing some sort of link thing where they, like, if you're doing surgery on someone, you can like talk to another doctor across the world about how to do the surgery and how to make sure it's done properly, or like even do it from home so you can save lives more faster. So I was wondering, if Watson can probably connect to those doctors, he can probably pull more information and probably, gather more details and more accurate points to even save lives himself if he becomes in a robot prototype.
So I think that's a really interesting idea. I mean, we've been thinking about Watson as an assistant for an expert, so there's still the physician that's making the final decision. If you can connect all these experts together, they can help train Watson to make it even smarter in that domain. So interesting ideas.
Right. And one thing I'd like to add to that is what IBM is actually working with Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Manhattan, where they have the state-of-the-art treatment for certain types of cancer. And the idea there is to encode the decision-making process of how to treat certain cancers based on the patient's specific characteristics into Watson, so then they'd be able to deploy this to more broadly, so people who can't afford to come to Manhattan to see these doctors can go to their doctor, and the doctor can consult with the Watson system to come up with better treatment. So that's another way of disseminating the information.
Great.
As Watson is going into the medical field, and he should know all the types of diseases that are around now. But let's say a new disease was developed out of nowhere.
That's a good question.
Would he be able to know how to cure it or find a solutions for something about it?
That's a great question.
That is.
By the way, Watson's not a he. I think it's a she. Yeah.
So that's an interesting question. I mean, the way that Watson works
Smart.
right now is it analyzes all of the existing literature. So it's knowledge that somebody has already written down, whether it's in a textbook or in a journal article. So when something new comes out, I think what Watson can do is recognize when it doesn't have a lot of evidence to support some sort of diagnosis. And if none of the existing known diagnoses really bubble to the top with a lot of confidence, it at least could flag that there's something new and different going on here.
Chess and Jeopardy were the ideas of our grand challenges to elevate the level of technology and our understanding. Can you comment about what might be kicked around for future grand challenges?
Gosh. American Idol?
So one thing that comes to mind is the ability to innovate and be creative. And so if you can imagine a test wherein the subject needs to be innovative and creative, much like the previous question asked, can you recognize a new disease and also suggest ways to examine it, test it, and even cure it? This type of innovation and creativity really, I think, is an interesting grand challenge that we might see in the future.
Am I on? Okay. There's been a general sentiment on the Twitter feed, but this question comes specifically from Poughkeepsie High School. As technologies like Watson allow technology to become more automated, how will that change the employment landscape, and won't it be harder for people to get jobs?
I can address this. I think that we should remember that whenever new technology is invented, old jobs disappear and new jobs are created. And I don't think anything will change as we move forward into the age of cognitive computing. Instead, I think it will be more likely that we will become more and more effective, not only in terms of our physical abilities, as the Industrial Revolution provided us, say, 100 manpower multiplication of our abilities, but instead in terms of our abilities to get work done, to have teams of agents that go out and help us get the answers we need to solve problems, and maybe to even collaborate together in order to be effective. So the way I like to think about it in some of the groups that I've worked with here at IBM that have asked these similar questions is that in the future we'll all be, in a sense, CEO of Me Incorporated. That's one way to think about it.
If I were you, I would be much better looking. If I were you, though, I would start out and I would realize that you have to be very flexible. The stuff I studied, I studied vacuum tubes, and the stuff just disappears. So as the value moves, you're going to have to figure out how to go with it. So you might be studying math now, but in college you might be a cognitive scientist. 10 years down the road, you might have to be something else. And so I think that idea of kind of engineering yourself for that kind of flexibility is real important.